Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Peter Wood. Commissioner, good to see you. You've survived redistricting.
I was gonna say, you look fresh considering, 8 months of all of that. And so good afternoon, buenas tardes, boa tarde. My name is Peter Wood. I'm a Ward 1 resident and advisor neighborhood commissioner in Adams Morgan. And I'm here today to very much support the Domestic Worker Employment Rights Amendment Act of 2022. In full transparency, I don't really have much experience employing domestic workers, but I do have some experience as a worker myself. I've previously been employed as a custodian, a respite caregiver for children with developmental disabilities. I've volunteered in assisted living for seniors with dementia, and currently volunteer with in-home visits to patients in hospice receiving end-of-life care. And while not all domestic workers are immigrants, I have many friends and family who are, and I've also been an immigrant myself, having spent several years of my adult life in Latin America. I bring this up not to suggest my experience is representative, but to affirm that I have some degree of familiarity with the challenges involved and solutions required regarding the rights of domestic workers. And as many have rightly pointed out today, the current extremely inadequate treatment of domestic workers is a direct consequence of the repulsive legacy of slavery. I've lived and worked in Brazil, where twice as many people as in the US were forcibly enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade. Brazil is also notable because in 2015, they passed federal legislation, the Lei Complementar 150, establishing long overdue rights and protections for domestic workers there. Now, while Brazilian legislation isn't the only guide for our efforts here in DC, and testimony from cities like Philadelphia today confirms that, there are at least a couple items from the law I feel could strengthen ours. So first, insurance for accidents occurring at the place of work. Several others have spoken on this point today, and whether in this specific legislation or in future law, access to workers' insurance is essential for domestic workers to have the same peace of mind as those in other fields of employment. And work trips. As I currently read it, this bill applies to those working in a private residence without including language covering any work-related travel. I suggest making this modification as much domestic work takes place outside of private residences, whether on day-to-day trips like groceries or medical visits, or while accompanying an employer on something like a family vacation. Another final point I want to raise is that of work authorization and migration status, which are themes that have come up a few times over the course of the day. Now, laws are not particularly helpful without fair enforcement. And as commissioner, I can attest to the understandable reservations many hold when it comes to interacting with government representatives. There are many ways to incorporate this concern into effective enforcement, but I'll at least recommend clear communication, both in the text of this legislation and otherwise, that neither work authorization or migratory status are inquired about if and when a domestic worker files a complaint about their employer or work environment. Similar to sex workers, truly maintaining a safe place of employment means supporting exploited laborers rather than penalize them for coming forward. Thank you for my time, and most importantly to the many valiant professionals I've seen today who took time from their work schedule to testify for rights that should have been established lifetimes ago. Fuerza a todos.